In June 2023, a young volcanologist from Jakarta, Indonesia, was found severely dehydrated and barely conscious near the crater edge of Mount Lamongan, a relatively quiet volcano in East Java, Indonesia. His equipment was missing, his GPS dead, and he had been presumed lost for 4 days. This is his account. They told me it was a dormant volcano, quiet for centuries, minimal seismic activity, just steam vents and the occasional rumble. A perfect location, they said, for an isolated atmospheric study. I wasn't new to fieldwork, but this was supposed to be textbook. Easy in, 2 days of sampling and out. That's why I didn't question it when my university assigned me the solo mission. I remember the way the morning light cut through the mist as I hiked the initial trail. Everything felt calm. Too calm. Lamongan wasn't a towering beast like Merapi or Semeru. It was smaller, quieter. But that quiet had always unsettled me. Something about volcanoes that don't speak. They listen. They wait. My base camp was set near the northern ridge. Just a tent, a radio transmitter, backup batteries, water canisters, and my sensor kit. The first day was uneventful. Dry soil samples, air humidity checks, some minor fumarole readings. My GPS worked fine, even though the signal flickered now and then. The locals warned me not to trust electronics in the belly of the gods, but I brushed it off as folklore. The second morning, I woke up to an eerie stillness. Birds had vanished. Even the usual insect buzz was gone. The air felt heavier, thicker. I activated my atmospheric sensor again. Readings were normal, mostly. A slight uptick in CO2 levels. Maybe a geothermal pocket nearby, I thought. I hiked east to survey an old lava channel. My GPS blinked erotically, then froze. Signal lost. I tapped it, rebooted, nothing. I wasn't worried, yet. I had physical markers placed along the trail, and I'd memorized the route. Still, something gnawed at me. By late afternoon, clouds began rolling in unnaturally fast. Not storm clouds, ash clouds. Faint, dry, like powdered charcoal on the wind. I radioed into base, but only static came back. My backup handset was dead too. No storm, no solar interference, just silence. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I pressed forward another kilometer toward the rim. The ground was warmer than before, so subtle most wouldn't notice, but I felt it through my boots. Small gas vents hissed softly, like the volcano was exhaling in its sleep. I leaned closer to take a sample and felt it. Faint tremors under my feet. Not an earthquake, not yet, but the kind of movement that tells you something underneath is shifting, waking. I checked my watch. 17:12. Then the ground sighed. That's the only way I can describe it. A long, low groan from below. Trees around me trembled slightly, not from wind, from the earth itself. My legs didn't move. I should have run. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, staring into the dark mouth of something that should have never been this quiet. I had one last chance to retreat, but I didn't. I told myself I needed more data, just a few more readings, a little deeper into the zone. That was the last moment anything felt remotely normal, because after that, nothing made sense anymore. The air changed long before the sky did. Somewhere between the ash-coated ridge and the twisted leafless canopy, the silence thickened, heavier than before. Even the birds, those distant screamers I'd heard circling above, had gone. Only the sound of my own breathing remained. Shallow, rhythmic, and now a constant reminder that I was still moving, but not in any clear direction. I'd stopped using the compass 2 hours ago.
The needle spun like a drunk dancer, confused by some unseen interference. The map in my pack? Useless. What I saw around me didn't match anything on paper. Ravines where there should have been ridges. Dry earth where the satellite had marked water. Either I'd crossed into a different area, or the land itself had shifted. I kept walking. The heat was rising again. The first sign of something wrong came with the sulfur smell. Subtle at first, like a struck match in the distance, but it got stronger with every step. My eyes began to burn slightly. My throat felt tighter. I stopped under a crooked tree and opened my canteen. Only a few sips left. Something moved to my left. Not an animal, not a branch in the wind. It was low, deliberate, as if the ground itself had exhaled. I held my breath. A faint crackle echoed from deeper in the trees. Then the haze began. Not mist, not fog. Smoke. Thin tendrils rising from the soil like fingers. I crouched down, touched the earth. It was warm, too warm. Suddenly, a deep rumble vibrated beneath my feet, not sharp like thunder, but slow and rolling like the growl of something massive underground. A volcano. It had to be. I checked my surroundings. No open flame yet, no falling ash, but the signs were clear. The volcano was active.
Possibly erupting from somewhere nearby. The smoke wasn't thick enough to flee just yet, but if it increased, I'd be blind in minutes. And if the wind shifted, I moved faster. I didn't care about the compass anymore. My instincts took over. I followed the faint slope of the land downward, hoping it would lead toward water, or at least away from the volcanic ledge. My clothes clung to me with sweat. My breathing grew erratic. Heat rose not just from the ground, but from the very air, as if I were walking through a slow oven. After an hour, the trees thinned out. I stumbled into a clearing, wide, barren, filled with cracked, blackened rock. It looked like something had burned through this place decades ago, and then left it in limbo. And in the center, a circle of charred stumps, arranged in a perfect ring. I slowed my pace. Every instinct told me not to step inside, but I did, because in the middle of the ring was a backpack, old, weathered, covered in soot. It wasn't mine. I approached carefully, crouched, and unzipped the main compartment. Inside, a water bottle, half full, a journal, its cover partially burned, and a small metal pendant in the shape of a lizard, its tail curled, eyes made of tiny black stones. I flipped through the journal. Most pages were unreadable, charred edges, smudged ink, but a few entries remained. Smoke's getting worse. Lost signal. No GPS. Trees keep changing. Think I circled the same place 3 times. Saw something move in the ash. Not a person, not an animal. The stumps. They hum. They vibrate if you stand still long enough. If someone finds this, don't stay in the circle too long. I looked up. Suddenly, the wind dropped. Total stillness. And then I heard it. Not a sound from outside. A vibration. Under me. The stumps. Humming. Very faint, but real. I grabbed the journal, the water bottle, and backed out of the circle. The pendant I hesitated with, but took anyway. I didn't know what the ring was. A marker? A trap? A warning? Didn't matter. I had to keep moving. I left the clearing behind, fast, and didn't look back. I didn't want to know what might be following. Not yet. Not while I was still this close to the volcano. By the time I cleared the ridge, the forest was no longer just a forest. It had become something else. Part mirage, part maze. The trees leaned in ways that defied physics, curving toward one another like whispering giants. The air shimmered from the heat. and I could no longer tell if the haze came from volcanic smoke, hallucination, or both.
But I pushed forward. I had to. Behind me, the humming from the stumps had faded. Whatever that circle was, some kind of magnetic anomaly, ancient ritual site, or geological freak, it had left a residue in my body. My skin tingled, especially in my fingertips. The pendant I'd taken from the backpack grew warm, almost pulsing against my chest. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. Eventually, the ground underfoot turned brittle. Blackened earth, loose stones, sulfur rising thicker now. And then I saw it. A scorched canyon, jagged and shallow, splitting the forest floor like a wound. No water, no shade, just a long, cracked pathway carved by time or fire. I descended into it. Each step echoed too loudly. The silence up above was replaced by something worse. Low, constant vibration. My ears rang. My legs buzzed. I pressed on, hoping the canyon would lead me out, but it led me further in. That's when I found the bones. They were not fresh, long bleached by heat and sun, but unmistakably human. Two femurs, a shattered pelvis, and the curled remnants of a spine half buried in ash. No gear, no clothes, just bones and a scorched metal knife blade nearby, blackened and twisted. I didn't stop to study them, didn't need to. I knew exactly what they meant. Someone else had tried this route and failed. But that wasn't all. Beside the bones, partially hidden by rock, I saw it. A long, thin crack in the canyon wall, just wide enough to slip through sideways. Something beyond it shimmered faintly. A flicker of orange light. A way out? No, a way in. I squeezed through, the stone pressed on my shoulders, scraping my arms, stealing my breath. The pendant around my neck pulsed harder. My vision narrowed, and just when I thought I'd get stuck, I fell forward and landed in heat. The chamber on the other side was vast, wider than I expected, and glowing faintly from cracks in the rock overhead. Magma, not close enough to kill, but near enough to paint everything in amber and red. The air was unbearable. My skin began to itch. My lips cracked instantly. But then I saw it. At the center of the chamber was a platform of natural stone, smooth and circular, like it had been polished by hands over centuries. On top of it stood a single wooden staff, plunged into the rock. Wrapped around it, unmoving, a snake. Not alive, fossilized, petrified in place, its jaw open, fangs bared, its body wound tight around the staff.
Symbolic? Ancient? I didn't know, but I stepped closer. The moment I did, the pendant around my neck snapped its cord. It dropped to the stone, and the snake's fossil began to crack. Tiny fissures at first, then larger. I backed away instinctively, but the chamber pulsed. Heat surged from the ground. The cracks in the fossil spread like veins across the walls, across the staff, across everything. And then it happened. Not an explosion, not an earthquake. A sound. A deep, resonant note that didn't come from outside, but inside my bones. Like some frequency had been struck in me, and everything that wasn't solid was being shaken loose. I dropped to one knee, covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The snake crumbled into ash. The staff splintered. The light flickered and then died. Total darkness. Only my breath remained. Sharp, ragged. And then, from somewhere behind me, a voice. Not in words,
Not male or female, just presence, and the feeling of being known, seen, scanned. I turned around slowly, heart pounding. Nothing there, just blackness. But I didn't feel alone. And I understood something, without explanation, without proof. I had crossed into something sacred or cursed. Either way, I couldn't walk back the way I came. Not anymore. There was no turning back. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I never did. But when the light returned, it wasn't from the cracks in the rock or the dying glow of magma. It was dawn. Real light, soft, filtered through trees. And I wasn't in the chamber anymore. I was outside, lying at the edge of a riverbed, my face in the dirt, hands still shaking. The pendant was gone, the stone canyon, the petrified snake, the seismic hum. They felt like a fever dream. Except my shirt was burned at the shoulders, the soles of my boots half melted, and on my left forearm, etched as if seared into the skin, was the faint outline of a coiled serpent. A scar, not a wound, a mark that hadn't been there before. I sat up slowly. Everything hurt. My throat was dry enough to bleed, but the river next to me shimmered with clarity, cold, running, real. I staggered down and drank like a dying animal, hands cupped, lips cracked. It was the most real thing I'd felt in days. And yet, nothing around me looked familiar. This wasn't the canyon. This wasn't the jungle ridge. Somehow I had crossed miles without memory of movement. I should have been terrified, confused, but I wasn't. Not really, because the only thought circling my head wasn't, where am I? It was, I wasn't supposed to survive that. And yet, I had.
I walked for hours along the river. No trail, just instinct. My legs moved with a kind of rhythm I didn't command. It was like I was being guided, not by a force, but by something old in me that had finally been activated. And then, mid-afternoon, I found signs of human presence. Footprints in the mud, fresh, barefoot, adult-sized. I should have been relieved, but something felt wrong. I followed them. They led into a clearing where the trees opened in a near-perfect circle. At the center was a pile of stones, deliberately placed like a shrine or marker. On top, a single object, my backpack. The one I'd lost back near the ash trench, still zipped shut, untouched. As I approached, I noticed more details, markings on the stones, charcoal symbols, crude drawings of animals, rivers, eyes. One in particular stood out, a figure with arms raised, a circle above its head, and something slivering around its legs. I opened the pack. Everything was inside, intact, except one item. The lighter, the same one I'd used to light the leaves the night I got pulled into the humming field. Gone. Replaced with a smooth, black stone. No carvings, no weight, just a stone. Still warm. I dropped it. And that's when I heard it again. The sound. Not the seismic hum this time, but drums. Faint, rhythmic, from somewhere beyond the tree line. I turned, scanning for movement. Nothing, but the rhythm continued. Slow and low, like a heartbeat. I didn't run. I should have, but I didn't, because a part of me wanted to know who had returned my backpack, who had marked my skin, who had dragged me from the volcanic chamber and laid me at the river's edge.
The answer wasn't logical. It wasn't even visible, but it was there. In every step I took away from that circle, in the way the trees bent slightly with the wind, forming symbols I couldn't fully understand, in the way my pulse now matched the distant drums. The forest was no longer a place, it was a participant, and I had been chosen or claimed to go deeper, to see what others had only glimpsed and run from. I walked until nightfall. No food, no destination, only a strange, burning awareness behind my eyes, and a single message pulsing through my body like heat through wire. The threshold was never behind you. It's ahead, and you've already crossed it. The trees changed, not gradually, but all at once, like stepping through an invisible curtain.
The air was thicker, damp but charged, as though every particle held a current. Leaves no longer rustled with wind. They shimmered, pulsed faintly, as if breathing. It didn't feel like a forest anymore. It felt like something waiting. By then, night had fallen, but the darkness wasn't complete. A glow, faint and copper-colored, lit the horizon ahead. Not fire, not moonlight, something else, something unnatural. I moved toward it. The drums had stopped hours ago, but the rhythm remained, in my chest, behind my ribs, like my own heartbeat had been rewritten. I was hungry, but not weak. I was tired, but not in danger of collapsing. It was as though the rules I had arrived with no longer applied. The first real sign of them came as I crossed a dry creek bed. On the far side, pressed into the mud, was a handprint. 5 fingers, human-sized, but each fingertip had left a burn mark. Still hot. The air stilled. Somewhere behind me, leaves cracked. I didn't turn. I just kept walking. A part of me already understood. Whatever watched me didn't want to be seen, only sensed. They fed off presence, not confrontation. They weren't predators in the traditional sense. They were sentinels, and I had entered their domain. Eventually, the trees opened into a wide basin. At the center was the source of the light, an old, collapsed temple, blackened with time, half swallowed by the earth, but still pulsing with a dull ember glow from within. Its stone walls were covered in ivy, but beneath the vines, faint carvings shimmered, coiling shapes, serpents intertwined with river lines. A sun split in 2 halves, one bright, one pitch dark. And again, the kneeling figure, same as before, mouth open to the sky. This time, I entered. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. I saw no torches, no lanterns, yet the walls glowed. The carvings weren't just designs, they moved. Not like animation, like memory, like echoes of something ancient still replaying itself. I stepped over what looked like an altar, then down a narrow passage leading deeper underground. The hum returned, low, penetrating, resonating through bone and breath. And that's when I saw them. Figures, not fully formed, half shadow, half light. Dozens of them, lining the walls, seated cross-legged, hands on their knees as if in permanent meditation. None moved, none breathed, and yet they watched, or remembered, or were memory itself.
But something within me shifted. like a veil inside my own perception was being peeled back. I remembered, not names, not events, but feelings. A life before this one, or maybe beneath it. A jungle, a fall, a circle of fire, a choice, and a vow I had made in a tongue I no longer recognized, but my blood did. I reached the final chamber. At the center stood a stone basin filled with a glowing liquid, amber and molten, like the sky before a storm. Above it, hanging by strands of vine, was the pendant I'd lost. But now, it was different. No longer a simple stone. It pulsed, beat, like a second heart. I didn't question what to do. I reached out and touched it. The moment I did, the world shattered. Not physically, but perceptually. I saw layers peeled back, this forest, this place, even my body, like clothing dropped from a soul that had worn too many names. I saw things I wasn't meant to see, not as punishment, but as remembrance. The hunt wasn't a threat. It was a cycle. The chased became the hunter. The lost became the guide. And I was in between, a liminal thing, a bridge. When I opened my eyes, the pendant hung around my neck again. The chamber was empty. The light had gone, but the knowing remained. I was not out yet, but I was not prey either. Now I had a direction, not home, but forward. The ember sky above the temple flared once, just once, and then faded. I stepped into the night, and the forest did not resist me. It opened, as if welcoming back one of its own. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. The jungle no longer felt like a threat or a mystery. It felt like memory stirred to life. Every branch I passed, every stone beneath my foot was familiar now, like I'd walked this route 1,000 times before, in dreams I'd never remembered. Even the shadows seemed to lean away from me, as if I was no longer a trespasser, but something else entirely. The pendant was warm against my chest, not hot, just alive, like a compass not made for direction, but for purpose. It didn't point north, it pulled, somewhere deeper, not outward, but inward, toward a center I had never realized existed. By midday, I reached the river, the same one I'd crossed days ago, now wider and slower under the sun. Its current murmured low and steady, like a voice too old for words. I sat by the edge and let the pendant touch the water. The ripple it caused didn't vanish. It moved outward, then curved back toward me. I took that as a sign. That evening, as the sun bled into the tree line, I saw smoke.
Not from a fire, from engines, a helicopter. Distant, barely visible, weaving between clouds and jungle haze, but real, solid, a reminder that the world I'd come from still existed somewhere. I had a choice, move toward it or not. I marked my direction with 3 stones at the water's edge, one upright, 2 flat, like the old woman in the grove had shown me. Then I walked, not toward the helicopter, not away, just forward. That night, I reached the edge of a clearing, man-made. Tarpaulins, crates, tire tracks, a small search party camp. I stayed hidden in the brush, watching. A radio crackled. A man yawned. Another stirred a pot over a portable stove. They looked like rangers or soldiers, maybe both. And then I heard my name. We think he might still be alive. I stepped out. They froze, stared. One of them muttered something under his breath. Another reached for a walkie.
I raised my hand, not as a threat, just to show I was real, alive. They offered water, food, a blanket. I accepted the water. The rest I declined. They asked where I'd been. I told them, in the forest. They asked how I survived. I didn't answer, because I hadn't survived. Not really. I had been reshaped. The man I'd been, the one who had panicked in the flood, who had feared the darkness, who had chased the sound of drums thinking it was death, he didn't make it. Someone else had walked out. Someone who understood that the forest wasn't a place. It was a trial, a mirror, a forge. And now, standing under the clear sky for the first time in weeks, I realized something else. I hadn't been chosen. I had chosen. I had stepped toward the unknown, not away, and it had answered. When I boarded the helicopter 2 days later, I kept the pendant tucked beneath my shirt. The markings on my skin had faded now. Only faint outlines remained, like scars from a dream. But I felt them still, in the way I moved, in the way I listened. The man beside me asked what I'd learned out there. I looked at him, smiled, and said that not everything lost wants to be found, and not everyone found was ever truly lost. He laughed, thought I was joking. I didn't correct him. As the rotor blades lifted us above the canopy, I looked down one last time, and in a small clearing near the river's bend, I saw them, a circle of figures, still, watching, not threatening, just remembering, and welcoming the one who had returned, not just alive, but changed forever.